I would say one of the hardest things as a parent is your kids unpacking all of their emotions onto you, and sometimes I'm literally like, am I just an emotional sponge? I just end the day feeling frustrated, flat, a bit kind of worried about my sort of parenting skills, and it really starts little with tantrums, and that's kind of what got me into gentle parenting really early on, was figuring out, that they're having a feeling, they're having a hard time, not giving me a hard time, but it kind of carries on all the way up through. So my eldest is 12 now. Those tweens, they bring it. They bring it. And it's often at times of the day, like the morning, when you just want to be calm and have a nice morning, or straight after school. So there are sort of 4 things that I think have really, really helped me, and I know will really help you if you're feeling a bit of like basically parental burnout because of it. And I think that what explains it really well, I do have a top book recommendation for you at the end of the video. It's just this idea that it's fine, and we understand that that's part of parenting, and I love gentle parenting. I'm a really intentional mum like that. But when our sort of cereal bowl is full, we're full, we have enough on our plates literally, then when they're packing their emotions on top, there's nowhere for it to go, and it all just spills over. So a lot of the other flip side of gentle parenting is about how to regulate our own emotions, because actually the best thing I've learned now is, rather than focusing so much on their behavior, it's what can I change about my response to it. And that's just really the only thing we're really in control of, and it gives us that control as well. And self-care isn't just have a nice bath, mum. Go for a nice walk. It's like so much more than that, and we really need to have practical tools, and all my gentle parenting videos are really practical. This is what to do that's helped me. So number 1 is kind of counterintuitive, but it is, don't solve it. Don't think, how am I gonna get through this? How am I going to fix this for them? Just take the total point of, I'm not here to solve it. And we know that's grown ups, that we just want somebody sometimes just to listen, just to ride through the emotions, like especially if it's like hormonal. There really is sometimes, and we know that probably more as women, those hormones start super young for boys and girls, that sometimes the feeling, they can't explain it and they can't control it, and they need to know it's going to end, that they can just go through it. And sometimes we're there trying to make the solution, because if it's, as a mum, you take it as your job is to solve it and to finish it quickly, or to have a happy house, and a happy house meaning smiling, whereas a happy house is really a house where everyone's allowed to have a down day. That's what makes a happy house, and that's what makes a friendship. And so I think my biggest tip for this is to flip it really quick, for finding yourself too worried and too invested, this is going really wrong, is flip it into, how would I act if this was my best friend? How much more patient would I be? How much more empathetic would I be? If it was my friend sat there just crying, I wouldn't immediately think, you got nothing to cry about. I wouldn't try and fix it. I wouldn't try and cheer them up. I would just be like, what's wrong? And I would listen. And so I did this the other day, my child, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, it's getting late and they want to chat. And I thought, do you know what, if this was my friend, I would just sit, listen, I would ride through all of these kind of like feelings that they're having, and I wouldn't try and solve it. I would just listen and be at the end of it. And it's a really helpful thing to do, and it's good for, you've got a toddler as well. How would I act if this was a stranger screaming and crying because they'd fallen over? I wouldn't sort of try and just pick them up and put a smile on it and rush past it. I would take the time to sit at their level and listen, and doing that all the way through. Don't try and be the solver in those situations. Just try and be the really good friend, and think about what a good friendship is, because I've got friends who I just love hanging out with, and they always make me smile, and we always laugh together and we play together, and they're there for the good bits. But those true friendships are the people that you can also just sit, do nothing, be grumpy around, and know that they're not judging you. And that is really what we're wanting when we're saying like connecting. My second one is self-preservation, really, but also work sort of on this sort of different level where you limit your time. So if you're sat with a child who's just really crying, they're not really communicating, they've gone off, they're really upset, they're crying in their room or something, you're not really sure what's gone wrong, or they're get out, or they're pushing you away, or you feel like you need to be there because you can tell that's not really what they want, is just limit your time. So sometimes I'll be like, look, I'm here for 10 minutes, then I'm going to go and have a cup of tea. Or then you go back in, it's like, right, I'll be here for 10 minutes, I'll be by your side for 10 minutes, then I'm going to go and read a chapter of my book or watch a little segment of a TV show, because sometimes these feelings drag on for so long, and we really, really sit there. And I've made this mistake so many times where I've put myself into the trenches and just stayed for like a sort of a whole evening of refusing to go to bed, or issues, or they keep coming up and they keep coming up, and it's just because I'm sitting there and putting myself through, not giving myself little breaks. And if they're safe and they're well, then you can kind of come out, and don't put a time limit. That's a tip. So don't say I'm going out 5 minutes, I'll be back, because they will time you. Whereas if I say I'm going off to have a cup of tea and then I'll come straight back in, it gives you that break. And I think the biggest thing is, it's that action. I will come back, I will always come back, and that hits harder. That goes into our head much more than just staying put and maybe making it escalate. And I find this even with my daughter who's 5 trying to get to sleep alone. If I say I'm just going to pop out and fold the laundry and I'll come back, and as I've been doing that now, the first time I go, by the time I'm back she's asleep, whereas when I was just sitting in her room, didn't work. So actually leaving, coming back, putting a task in what you're doing, and then you're going to come back in these really intense emotional meltdowns with older kids does help preserve your own headspace as well. Third one is one that is gentle parenting number 1, but it is don't punish. So at a time of high emotions, you know, they could be using bad words, not talking about swearing, but like they could be sort of saying more hurtful things, they could be hitting around the room, they could be doing things, they could be sort of, you know, just doing behaviour that is sort of really testing. But if it's in an emotional meltdown moment, you know, is that thing of, you know, I forgive myself for what I did when I was angry, and we have to sort of let that pass on to our kids as well. What we need to teach them is emotional resilience. And so what reason I hate punishment as well is I think that sometimes we punish, we go, right, for 3 days now, you've just, you know, you just thrown that really expensive toy on the floor, now you're not going to have it for 3 days or whatever. And then it's like day 3, things are fine, they've forgotten that bad mood, you know, maybe they've a bit more rested or whatever, but they haven't learned anything, but they're still not getting their thing, and it just keeps you pulling you back in your brain to the argument. And I really believe in mistakes being forgiven. So don't punish at that point. It's a really good time to have a chat and do my next tip, which is to give them power and control in that moment rather than a punishment. So say the argument or the meltdown is around school, and then unhappy at school. It's like, okay, well, let's write a routine that we're going to do before and after school that's going to help you deal with school. If the argument is about a bedtime, or their emotions are around a bedtime, it's okay, you write your bedtime routine. How would you like it to look? You know, this time is bedtime. What happens after dinner towards bedtime? And you write it, because they're so much more willing to follow their own rules, and they will be sensible, and then they've written their own routine. So next time they're really unpacking all their emotions onto you, and you're thinking, I didn't say you had to do that, or I'm not school, I'm not the king who said you have to go to school, it's just the law. And it's kind of, we're taking it all onto us. It's like, give that control back. Say you write how you want it to be, and then look at it together and go, okay, we can do that, for sure we can. And they're much more reasonable if you've given them that little bit of power. My last one is a bit different. It's a thing I started during lockdown, and it's called the forgetting tree. So basically I find it really hard sometimes in these huge emotional dramas to calm down, and so do my children, or even to move forward and put things in the past. When it's been this huge meltdown, it's at what point do then they're suddenly laughing at dinner and I'm still fuming, or I'm still like carrying it. So we had this thing called the forgetting tree, which we started in lockdown, but we still do, where there's a tree at the end of our road, and me and the child is having a really tough time with their emotions. Once it's sort of plateaued a bit, we'll walk down to that tree together just quietly, and sometimes we're angry and I can feel I'm still so pent up, and we'll sort of talk on the way and sort of, you know, go back over it if that's appropriate. You know, this was what you were feeling, it still wasn't okay to do this, you know, use those words, or to break that toy, but you know, we'll talk it through. Then we say, when we turn around past the tree and walk back, we've forgotten it. And I physically do it. We walk round the tree and I go, and I let my shoulders go down, and I take my tongue away from the roof of my mouth, and I sort of do a thing where I sort of look around as if like, as if I've forgotten, like acting forgotten, and they sort of look at me like, okay, and it's like, I've got that fresh chance again, I can start again, she's not angry, even if you are. You know, and it just sets a base again that you can build up from. And you know, if you've had a really difficult morning, it doesn't mean you need a difficult afternoon, or if the afternoon's been awful, you just need to get into bedtime and you just need to get through that. try a little walk around the block or past a bit of your garden if you've got a big enough garden, I don't, and try this sort of idea of this forgetting and that physical act of releasing your anger about it. I find super helpful for me, and that's all about me forgiving and forgetting, putting it back on. If there's been a consequence or a change through their own plans of how we're going to deal with it going forward, that has to happen. So there's not no consequences, mummy's forgotten. You know, we've still got a plan in action, but I find it a really physical and easy thing to actually change the day and demonstrate that the emotions were there, they were big, they were important, we've made the decision to change it, but now we've forgotten it and we can move forward. So those are my little tips on how I have found some strength when my kids are totally unpacking their emotions on me. It's a huge thing. It's probably the biggest thing I talk about with my friends, as I said. So the book is called Between by Sarah Ockwell-Smith. I've lost my copy, it's somewhere in my house. I will put it on the screen. It's for 8 to 12-year-olds and it's amazing. It is so good. It really helps you to understand what's going on in their little minds. And I hope you found this useful. There are over 50 gentle parenting videos here on my channel, all ages from newborn through. So do check those out and subscribe if you would like more gentle parenting videos. I love making them. I love chatting about this stuff, keeping myself in check with it. And I'll see you on my next video. Bye guys.